All right, well, it's quiet. We'll start. So we are in Job chapter 20 together today. Our goal is to get through chapter 20 this week and chapter 21 next week before taking in the summer off. That'll finish the second cycle of the speeches of the friends. Today we get the last of that cycle. Zophar speaks, and then after his speech, Job will rebut him again, as he's done with all of these. So let's see, do we have any nice paragraphs here? I'm seeing 2 breaks in the chapter. Yep, 1 to 11 and then 12 to 19 are the 2 paragraphs, the way that this Bible's got it parsed out. So I guess 1 to 11 if somebody wants.
Then Zophar the Naamite answered and said, "Therefore my thoughts answered me, because of my haste within me. I hear censure that insults me, and out of my understanding a spirit answers me. Do you not know this from of old, since man was placed on earth, that the exulting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless but for a moment? Though his height mount up to the heavens, and his head reach to the clouds, he will perish forever like his own dung. Those who have seen him will say, Where is he? He will fly away like a dream and not be found. He will be chased away like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place any more behold him. His children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will give back his wealth. His bones are full of his youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in the dust."
All right, thank you.
Why?
Yeah.
I'm depressed.
Well, that's most of the book.
I know.
The 3 friends are on this, they've got a one-track mind here. They really think they've got this pegged, and they just keep hammering this one home, so, or trying to at least.
Not much cheer there, Paul.
This chapter will be the last that we see Zophar speak in Scripture. So we're not quite halfway through the book of Job by the end of this, and he is done. So there is a 3rd cycle. Eliphaz gives a full speech, Bildad gives about a half speech, and then Zophar doesn't show up.
We don't know, he may have had a heart attack and died, right?
He's still there. He gets rebuked. The 3 friends all get rebuked by the Lord at the end of the book. So, yes, if the Lord had smited him on the spot, maybe the other friends would have repented sooner. I don't know, but no, he's there. He just, I guess, decides it's not worth his breath anymore. So, verse 2, Zophar's thoughts have driven him to respond, almost like he's been waiting for this opportunity. This is part of a cycle. Someone speaks, someone else has to answer. We have that as a culture too, right? We have to have the last word. It's hard to just
Mine is right.
right. It's hard to just walk away. Verse 3, the word censure, the Hebrew word is chastisement or correction. So he's been rebuked. He's felt it. He's insulted by it. I'm here to rebuke you. How dare you rebuke me? But I also, again, just like verse 2, this is our culture as well, right? That we live in. If somebody tells somebody else they're in the wrong, how's that go over?
Like a lead balloon.
We are highly offended and immediately will shift either into defensive mode or into attack. Those are different responses for sure, but both the same idea. And that has led to, unfortunately, the silence of a lot of Christians, an unwillingness to speak the law of God to our neighbor, to say that the things they're doing are destructive and not helpful, out of fear of how they'll respond. So my encouragement on that would be to remember that the Lord is good. Take heart, have courage, speak the truth. Your neighbor's dying. They need to hear the good news. They need to hear the truth of God's word. If no one says anything, their ticket's already punched. And that's not good. So the Lord might just work through you to place a real hope in them. And Worst case scenario, if they kill you, Christ raises you. So we really have nothing to lose, although the world teaches the opposite. Zophar's last phrase of verse 3 is woodenly from the Hebrew, a spirit, a wind from my understanding answers me. The question is it his spirit or is it the Holy Spirit that is doing this? And I don't have an answer for you on that one per se. We'd probably lean towards it being Zophar's own spirit within him. But it reminded me a bit of Jeremiah. Chapter 20, Jeremiah says, "If I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, there is in my heart, as it were, a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I am weary holding it in, I cannot." Now, in fairness, Jeremiah was holding back the word of God, and God didn't want him to do that, so God made it bubble up within him until it just started coming out again. Kind of a fun text.
NIV says, "I hear a rebuke that dishonors me, and my understanding inspires me to reply."
So NIV skipped the word spirit altogether.
Yes.
The word is definitely in the Hebrew text. So it can be translated, I mentioned this on Sunday morning because we've been dealing with that same word in Genesis, spirit or wind.
Isn't this what he refers to, my understanding?
Out of my understanding, a spirit answers me, is how ESV translates this. So yeah, there's a word there NIV just kind of skipped over. But again, the base idea could be that this is Zophar's spirit within him that's making him want to speak. But it could be the Holy Spirit kind of prodding him along and keeping this conversation going, knowing that it's going to be the inspired word of God that we would have before us to encourage us today. This is written for our learning and for our benefit. So I wrestled with that one a bit. I don't have an answer for you, but the word spirit certainly is in the text. The question is capitalized or not. And Hebrew didn't do that. Hebrew didn't have capital letters. At least Greek had capital letters, but Hebrew didn't. So, verse 4, Zophar invites Job to consider wisdom as old as the world itself from the time that God has created. And for the rest of this speech, there will be a mixture of truth. It's the same theme we saw from Eliphaz and Bildad in speech 2 for both of them, that the wicked will perish. The question just is the timeline, right? How quickly do the wicked perish? And in some parts of this chapter, Zophar takes that bigger picture that we would absolutely agree with, that the wicked perish in the long run. Before the judgment, they do not survive. There's other spots in this chapter where he makes it sound like it's swiftly in earthly terms as well. And so that's what we would end up disagreeing with. So, the exulting, a word that means rejoice. Joy means treasure. Let me stop and unpack this, right? The things that the wicked view as their treasures in this world, the things they put their hope in, their trust in, they might rejoice in them for a moment, but those things don't last. They are taken away in the judgment. They do not endure. They'll die and they'll have nothing left. Nothing good as they're severed from the Lord forever. So, that it's short, that it's but for a moment, we would certainly agree with. Again, big picture, but even narrow picture, right? Because our time on this earth is but a moment. Even if we limited paradise to 1,000,000 years, your lifespan here would still be 0.007% of your existence. And 1,000,000 years, you'll just be getting started. So this is but a moment. That's a good thing for us to remember. And it helps us also then because our hope isn't here. Our hope is in Christ. Our treasure, our joy is in Christ. As the New Testament reminds us, 1 Peter 2, that we are sojourners and exiles here. Peter writes, "You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. So we are not of this world, right? We are to be set apart. Verse 6, Zophar still certainly speaks bigger picture of the wicked man's life. He can build as high as he wants to build. He can accumulate as much earthly glory to himself as he wants. This is a bit of the challenge Jesus issues to the Pharisees when you think of the Sermon on the Mount. Right? They've done everything to be seen by man, and man has doted on them, and Jesus says they've received their reward in full. That's all they're getting. They're not getting anything in paradise for this. So that's the caution here. This is glory that does not last. This is power that does not last. Wealth that does not endure. It all perishes when the man does. Because you can't take these things with you. You can't take your power or your wealth or your legacy or your name. Job chapter 1 verse 21. Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked shall I return. The only thing that we bring before God is our sin. Which, thanks be to God, what's he done with it?
Got rid of it.
He's forgiven it. He's removed it from us and placed it upon himself. And so we can approach his throne with confidence. That's Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. But we also approach it humbly. Right? We don't come before God boasting about how great we are. We come before him like little children approach their father, knowing that the Father loves them and provides. As Jesus teaches a couple of analogies like that in the New Testament as well. If there's anything that you can take with you, and we wouldn't really even phrase it that way, but if there's anything, it's your neighbor. The only works that we have that endure time are those that we have shared with our neighbor in Christ. For if they hear the good news and believe, that's what the end of that Peter passage was saying, they get to join us in paradise someday. That's the only legacy that endures the test of time. And that's why we seek to love and serve our neighbor. We want them to be there with us as well. Verse 7, that's quite a first half of that sentence. He will perish like his own dung. Man is nothing but poop. It leaves the body, it returns to the earth. So as our days run out, our spirit is separated from the body, and the body returns to the ground from which it came. The second clause is a short-lived thing. Zophar will even express that same idea later in the chapter, because normally man is forgotten, but for a period after death, man is remembered. But mostly because of how people benefited from him. Especially the wicked man, right? If you're in league with the wicked and you were benefiting from his wickedness, you don't miss him because he was a loving, dear neighbor to you. You miss him for his stuff, and that eventually you find a new provider and you move on. Isaiah 23 speaks this way in the prophecy against the city of Tyre. If you remember Tyre, it's a port city. Hey, it's actually on that map. I never remember which map I leave up on this chart in this room. But in the orange section, against the Mediterranean Sea near the top, there's two city names. Sidon's the highest one reaching out into the sea. The one down from it is Tyre. So not far from where Israel is, not far from the Promised Land. It is a city that was known for its great wealth through merchant trade. They traded with all the nations around the Mediterranean Sea. So a very, very wealthy city. And all the other nations depended on that. And so in Isaiah chapter 23, the Egyptians are sad that Tyre is going to be destroyed. Again, not because Tyre's anything important or to them, other than it helps make them wealthier. So eventually they will move on. Verse 8?
Question on verse
Yeah.
7.
Sure.
The concept of verse 7 saying perish, that he will perish forever, and in the context of eternity, I guess, in reality, no one perishes forever in terms of an awareness for both the believer and the unbeliever. There is an eternity.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it depends on how you're defining perish here, because what you were just saying is correct, right? The scriptures, if you look at the way Jesus phrases it in Matthew 25, there is no life apart from him. So on the last day, everyone is raised, both the faithful and the unbelieving. Everyone is raised, but only the faithful are raised to life. The unfaithful are described as being raised to judgment. But we absolutely do believe that the judgment is everlasting. There is a teaching out there called annihilationism, which teaches that hell does not endure. So you're judged, you're cast into hell, the fire consumes you, it burns up, and it's gone. Nothing exists anymore other than paradise. We don't believe that's what the scriptures teach. So Revelation has some contrary statements that would support the idea that suffering does endure, it keeps going. Suffering because you're severed from Christ. But Romans 1 teaches that's what they wanted, and eventually God gives the sinner what they want. Right? If you live your whole life here wanting to be severed from God, so God eventually just says, okay, and severs the link, and that's it. But yeah, they still exist as we would think of existence. Yeah. And so what exactly that will look like for them, just like we have trouble describing paradise, we have trouble defining the opposite, but it won't be good. It's called the lake of fire for a reason.
That counters the secular idea of, well, you got this life and then you just die, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's counter, obviously, of what the Bible teaches in terms of
Yep, that's
judgment and what the consequences are, if you will.
that one's been very much evolution's impact. Right? If you want to talk about the deepest impact of evolution, it may be that. It's given the atheist his worldview. It's given him his excuse to reject that there's a spiritual reality at all. He can now just say, well, we're just accidents, we're just here. See, science proves it. We live, we die, it doesn't matter. Before, in the history of the world, that wasn't an option. You could be an atheist, but that atheism really was what the Greek word implies. You were against the Lord. Your faith was not that God doesn't exist. It was an opposition. It was a rebellion. And certainly unbelief is a rebellion still, the way we would look at it. But many atheists would say, I don't hate God. There is no God. So yeah, that kind of a teaching has spurred that there's nothing after this. But that's a relatively new idea. How many of you remember your dreams from last night? Me neither.
Depends, I remember if they're good or bad, whether anxiety dreams or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but I can't recall any detail. It's just,
Yeah.
okay, I had an anxiety dream, but I can't remember what it was about.
That Joyce was gonna hit you in the head.
Maybe that was it. And I wake up in the morning, I got a bruise and, no.
So, dreams come and go. Sometimes when we first wake up, especially, is probably when we might remember them the best. But even that, it's kind of a fleeting memory because within minutes it's slipping away. Even if you want to. Have you ever had one of those dreams where you wake up and you're like, that was such a good dream. I wish I could go back to it. Like, you can't. That's not how it works.
It's like I solved a problem, but now I don't know how.
Well, sometimes it's so weird,
They often are, yeah.
yeah, cause I'll get up and I'll go tell Ron, you would not believe, just nuts.
So we might remember it for a bit, but eventually it's gone. And that's the way it is with the wicked man. That's verse 8 here, right? He will fly away like a dream and not be found. Shortly after his death, the world forgets. Verse 9, simple acknowledgement of his death. His neighbors won't see him anymore. His home that he built, he won't walk through that door again. You could probably look at the second half of the sentence, his place. I mean, how does NIV take that? 9b.
Place will look on him no more.
Okay, so it still uses place. I think you could use that as in the physical sense of his actual dwelling place, his house. But I almost wonder if it's also possible to think of it in terms of his community, his place, his station, his roles in the. But however you see it, right, he won't be seen again. I mentioned it at the beginning that this is very much a repetition from Eliphaz and Bildad's speeches before. So, for example, in chapter 18, Bildad shared the idea that the memory of the wicked man perishes. He shared the idea that the children of the wicked man dry up and are gone, and that's verse 10 here. The children will seek the favor of the poor. That idea is going to get picked up on more in verses 20 and 21 later, so we'll leave some of this for then. But the idea that the wicked man consumes all of his wealth and leaves nothing for his children. So they're left searching. They're poorer than the poor, and they're left searching for help even from them. That's kind of a way to read verse 10. Verse 10 is a tricky one grammatically because of the second half of the verse in particular. The original Hebrew language had no vowels, at least not in the written text. So if you just, this is a fun experiment sometime, take an English sentence, just make up a sentence and write it down, or I guess, go to a newspaper article or whatever, clip a sentence. Take out all the vowels and take out all the spaces. Just run all those consonants together.
Oh, my.
And then see, come back to it a week later. see if you can remember what it said. But it's a reminder to us in terms of how languages used to function, how the written word used to be seen, right? Our culture values the written word quite highly compared to the spoken word. You think of testimonies and things like that, but they were the opposite. They valued the spoken word above the written word. They did, which is one of those things, again, contrary to evolution, which teaches we're always getting better and improving. I think their memories were steel traps and ours are just fleeting. So, they would memorize the book and then the actual written text, which again has no vowel pointings to it whatsoever. It's just there as a guide. So think about Sunday morning, you're reciting one of the creeds in church and you kind of fumble for a second and forget your place. There it is, printed in front of you, here's where we are, and you just pick up again. That's kind of how the written word functioned for them at that point in history.
Well, most of us had to memorize the catechism and Bible verses and the whole 9 yards. Do kids do that anymore? And can they?
Can they's the better question. We don't require it here, but I think if I was trying to require it here, I'd have trouble confirming just about anybody because their memories, they're just not there. The screen has done that in large part, but it's been happening more and more over the generations.
Yeah, because we had to memorize poetry in high school, and most of us at one time, probably not now entirely, could recite the Gettysburg Address.
Anybody got it?
Yeah, I could probably do most of it, but
Preamble to the Constitution, I remember memorizing that.
yeah. My mom was forever quoting Shakespeare.
I used to know the Lord's Prayer in 3 languages. Now I've got it in 1.
Well, when you were studying Hebrew, then was it like that? Was it just a whole bunch of letters?
No, so at some point or another, vowels were added to the text and spaces were added into the text to differentiate between words.
Okay. I was gonna say.
Yeah. No, the goofy thing to try and keep track of when you're learning Hebrew is the language works in the opposite direction. So instead of left to right, you read right to left. Instead of that being the front of the book, this is the front of the book. So I never even know on my shelf in my office, do I put the Hebrew Bible here or which side of the Greek Bible do I put it on? Because they kind of just meet in the middle. But, all right. So anyway, the reason I brought up that whole thing is one of the words in particular here, which most English Bibles translate as wealth, the last word in the English verse, right? That his hands will give back his wealth. I've got a whiteboard. Why not? The Hebrew consonants look like that. But depending on what vowels you decide to put with that word, it can mean two very different things. Erase some of the stuff around it to get rid of distraction here. So I'll write it up here again. If I point it like, maybe it's over here. If I point it like that, or if I point it just with that, those are both two different ways to spell it now. This one would be pronounced own, kind of like our own O-W-N word. This one would be pronounced something like owen. Own means power, strength, or wealth, which again is how most English translations take this word. Owen means wickedness or iniquity, or perhaps something like harm, trouble, deceit. The Greek Septuagint ended up going with a word that means sorrow or grief, which certainly would not connect to the first word, the power idea or the wealth idea. Some connection, a subtle connection at least, to the awen. Certainly not the iniquity, the sin side, but to the trouble or injustice side perhaps. So the Brenton Septuagint, just because we're doing all the translation stuff on Sunday morning right now, the Brenton Septuagint is the only one that really does this. It goes with the Greek text. It says, his hands kindle the fire of sorrow. That's a hard phrase to unpack even in itself, right? So Douay-Rheims and the Catholic Public Domain version are the only ones other than Brenton that don't use wealth here. They use sorrow and grief as the respectively between the two of them. So in that case, right, his hands give back his iniquity. All he had was his sin. All he had was injustice as he dealt with people. That's why his children have nothing. That's a way you could understand verse 10. Most English translations, though, using the word wealth here, end up kind of going with this idea that the children realized dad was evil and stole from a bunch of people, and so they take all the stuff dad had accumulated and they give it back. And that's why the poor favor them, because they gave them their stuff back. Technically, you could look at this verse in that light too. I don't know for sure, but it's a bit of a tricky one. And Job, again, the language is difficult for Job. He's not in the same era as the other Hebrew books often are, so it makes this tricky. And then we did verse 11 still, so Zophar's speech pivots back to the idea the wicked man's days are cut short. This is that picture from before as I was describing. When does the wicked perish? We agree the wicked perishes, but if you're going to argue the wicked always perishes young, history proves that wrong again and again and again, right? But that's where Zophar goes with verse 11. He dies while he's still young. So, some truthfulness, but not fully truthful as we go through Zophar's speech. Questions before we look at the third chunk of the text here. All right, 12 to 19 then.
Though evil is sweet in his mouth, though he hides it under his tongue, though he is loath to let it out and holds it in his mouth, yet his food is turned in his stomach. It is the venom of cobras within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. He will suck the poison of cobras. The tongue of the viper will kill him. He will not look upon the rivers, the streams flowing with honey and curds. He will give back the fruit of his toil and will not swallow it down. From the profit of his trading he will get no enjoyment. For he has crushed and abandoned the poor. He has seized a house that he did not build.
All right, thank you.
Ugh.
And remember, as we said with Eliphaz and Bildad both, it sounds generic. It sounds the wicked will perish generic. But it's like a backhanded, Job, you are this wicked person who's perishing. Right? So remember, keep that context. Who's listening to this speech? So evil is sweet in his mouth, hides it under his tongue. I was thinking about, like, if you pop a hard candy, right, you can do a few things. You remember those old commercials? How many licks does it take to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop?
Oh, yeah.
You could actually find out, or you can crunch it, as that commercial did. I think it only got to 3, right? A 1, a 2, a 3. Crunch. So if you suck on it, it lasts longer. But I was pondering, I couldn't find anything even on the internet talking about this. I think it lasts even a little bit longer. At least removes the temptation if you're just trying to hide it under your tongue and just let it sit there, rather than it moving around and getting quite as much work on it. So the idea that evil sits in his mouth, the idea that he lets it dwell there, that it lasts, he enjoys it, right? The idea that it's hidden means he's not showing it as he engages with the people around him. He's stealthy about the wickedness that he does. You can't let, even in an evil society, you can't let great evil show, or they will do something about your great evil because they want to be the great evil, right? You gotta compete over these things. If you're going around stealing from everybody, that's less for me to steal. You gotta stop, so I can't. That kind of a picture. I also did a little reading on sublingual absorption, which I don't know how true it is, but the suggestion is that your body, if you put a piece of medication or something under your tongue, your body can more quickly absorb it from there than it can if it were above. I don't know how true it is, but
Very.
okay. In that case, like
And
evil
also-
goes straight into your blood.
Also inside the cheek, because it's very vascular. Elderly, you know, during their last hours, you wanna just keep them comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the morphine is given. It's not with a needle, it's just liquid morphine that's put in between
Sure.
your gum and your cheek.
Okay. I don't think that's the direction that verse 12 is going. Just because verse 13, he wants to hold it there. He doesn't want anybody to take it, right? He just wants to savor this. But the idea that it went into the blood or absorbed easily into the blood was interesting because of Leviticus, which multiple times teaches that the life of a thing is in its blood. Interesting connection to make here, but verse 14, the food the wicked man takes in, when it hits his stomach, becomes something other than food. It turns. It doesn't benefit his body. It becomes something corrupt, something vile. And it's compared here to venom, and it destroys him from within. Verse 15. Are we still talking about food? I think there's a both and level, right? He's a glutton, vomits back up after he ate too much. But also he's a gluttonously greedy fellow who takes and takes and takes, and the Lord is forcing all that wealth out of him, like the food illustration. God casts them out of his belly. The only other time off the top of my head I could remember of God inducing vomiting in the scriptures was Jonah and the big fish. So that picture was in my head today. But ESV did a good job differentiating, I think, between venom and poison, the way English defines those two words. Venom is something injected, whereas poison is something ingested. So they're both deadly. The difference is in the delivery. how they are taken in. So the cobra injecting his venom versus verse 16, basically drinking it out of the snake. But then the second half of verse 16 returns kind of the other idea, right? The viper would by his tongue destroy, so the bite, the venom. But regardless of how you want to deal with that, Zophar is declaring again, the wicked man will die. Verse 17, he won't look on things because he's not alive. Dead men don't do a lot of looking around. He's no more. It is interesting the language that Zophar chose at the end there. Streams flowing with honey and curds. Does that sound familiar?
Milk and honey.
Yeah, the promise of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy primarily. I think it's in Leviticus too. It doesn't show up in Genesis. That promise is not given to Abraham directly, but to his descendants specifically. First time shows up as the burning bush, but the land flowing with milk and honey. Honey was their dessert before cane sugar became the addiction. And then milk just was such a wealthy thing because you couldn't preserve it. So to have a land flowing with it meant prosperity of having lots of livestock that could continuously provide you with that drink. Curds are a product made from milk, right? Made from dairy. So there's the connection there with that. Any of you ever done that?
Yes.
Made curds?
Yeah, cottage cheese.
Mm-hmm. We have a family that tried making cheese this year, or last year. The husband and the wife described that experience very differently.
So the term curds and whey, what is whey then?
That's the liquid. That's the
Mhm.
liquid.
That's the liquid that
Yeah.
comes off of. Okay.
Yep, from the old nursery rhymes. So I read something on that too that suggested cottage cheese being the closest thing to picture when you're thinking of that line.
Do that on the dairy farm.
And then you can eat cheese curds, deep fried, but they squeak even if they're not fried. So they probably squeak better if they're not fried,
Oh,
actually.
Wonderful in poutine. If you've ever been to Canada.
I've not been that far north.
It's essentially French fries with cheese curds and gravy.
Okay. Verse 18, Zophar has already painted the picture that the man is dead, so he can't enjoy the fruits of his labor, he can't enjoy the profits of his trades, he's gone, all those things are left to another. I was reminded here, again, this whole conversation, the way of the wicked will perish, that's one of the Psalms. Psalm 1 verse 6, Yahweh knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. And then we did verse 19 here as well. One of the first insights Zophar has given into what the way of the wicked actually looks like. Right? Because he holds evil under his tongue. Doesn't exactly tell you anything about what the wicked guy's been up to. Just tells you he likes his wickedness and he's holding on to it. But what has he done? He's not cared for the poor. He has not provided for them. So we can think of certainly Jesus teaching in Matthew 25 again. Whatever you did for one of the least of these, you've done for me. Whatever you didn't do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Instead, he's crushed them, stolen from them, made their poverty even worse for them. He did not build his own home. He stole it from someone else. These are examples that Zophar is giving here. And as we remember this cycle, the wicked perish is an argument and slight against Job himself. Is Zophar actually going as far here as to attempt to answer their question? Right? The friend's question is, we don't know what the deep sin hidden in you has been. Is Zophar suggesting these things could be what it is? Zophar, Job, you didn't actually earn all this wealth. You stole it. You didn't actually care for the people in your community. You robbed them. I don't know, right? But that's what the friends have been trying to find, is what is the hidden sin that's been destroyed and needs to be repented. So this could be what Zophar's thinking. Questions or thoughts on our middle chunk? We got through that one a lot faster than the first chunk. 35 minutes versus 10. I'm not sure what just happened. All right, well, then we get the last paragraph, which goes all the way from 20 to 29, if somebody wants to read it.
Surely he will have no respite from his craving. He cannot save himself by his treasure. Nothing is left for him to devour. His prosperity will not endure. In the midst of his plenty, distress will overtake him, and full force of misery will come upon him. When he has filled his belly, God will bend his burning anger against him and rain down his blows upon him. Though he flees from an armed weapon, a bronze-tipped arrow pierces him. He pulls it out of his back, the gleaming point out of his liver. Terrors will come over him. Total darkness lies in wait for his treasures. A fire unfanned will consume him and devour what is left in his tent. The heavens will expose his guilt. The earth will rise up against him. A flood will carry off his house, rushing waters on the day of God's wrath. Such is the fate God allots to the wicked, the heritage appointed for them by God.
All right. Thank you. So I mentioned verses 20 and 21 earlier, connection to verse 10, the children receiving no inheritance, the poor being poorer than the poor, that this could connect here. So we'll stay on that theme for a bit. But before we get to that, no contentment. That's also a challenge in our age, to be content with what you have. I don't know. Man has always probably struggled with that one. Contentment is gratitude. And the sinful nature doesn't like to be thankful. The sinful nature wants more. So finding no real contentment in what he has, he thinks he knows the way to a happy life, so he keeps gathering and gathering for himself. And soon he has more stuff than he has space and has to build bigger barns. How many of you know a hoarder?
Basement's full of it.
Yeah, the question of whether or not we fit the category, right? I still remember my college days working with a contractor, one of my college summers. We went to this lady's home, and it was one of those, like, there was not floor except for a narrow pathway about like this that snaked through the whole home from one room to another. It was just, I couldn't believe what I was seeing being in that space. We eventually did see her bed, although I don't have any idea how she could possibly sleep in it. It was so piled with stuff. I don't even remember what the job was. I have no idea what we were doing in that house. But I guess, yeah, we had an experience. So we got it. I guess we got the job done and got out of there. But it was a journey. So we have stuffitis badly in 21st century America. Not even just America, 21st century in the world. So, verse 21, somehow he manages to consume it all anyway. He did not find delight in the eating, but it's gone. His wealth was fleeting. He has nothing left to give. So, this is something, again, a struggle that we see gone, largely in our culture, gone are the days of leaving an inheritance. The idea of an inheritance, even. There's the greed side of it, like, I earned it, I should be able to do whatever I want with it, it's mine, which is not a Christian perspective. We are just stewards. We're not the owners. But then we couple that with the extravagant costs that the medical world and the nursing home world have built into the end of life. Like, even for the person who wants to leave a financial inheritance, there's often nothing left to give at that point. So there's lots of struggles in this regard. And that's not to paint the nursing home like everybody that works there is evil. Not at all. It's a struggle, though. I mean, I don't know when the idea was invented of the nursing home, but most of human history, you died in your home around your family. And that's changed now. Now you talk to people in nursing homes, one of their biggest concerns is dying alone, dying in a strange place, not being visited. Hear that a lot. I think it's the fear of death, if I'm trying to guess at what it is we try and remove death from us. If we don't have to see our loved one die, then death doesn't exist. Death can't hurt me. That's my guess, but I don't know for sure. But anyway, that's a reality that we're facing. But the inheritance picture here, the cost. Proverbs 13, verse 22. Solomon writes, "A good man leaves an inheritance to," do you remember that one? "His children's children." It's not even just to our kids, but to the generation beyond. He continued and said, "But the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous." That's a bit like the parable of the talents, the idea that the one who buried the talent, when the master came back, it was unearthed, and he gave it to the one who had the 10, right? It's given to the faithful eventually. But America's economy is a difficult place right now. Even though we have so much wealth, we're still in a very rough spot. I won't claim to have the answer to that. Yeah, silver bullet. We could fix this by tomorrow. Those who are just starting out into adulthood these days are shackled with a giant amount of college debt, student loans that make anything difficult coming out, right? You can imagine for when you were starting out, what would it have been like for 50% of your paycheck to be gone when you got your paycheck?
And yet they're told that this is the only way. that
Yes,
you're gonna
yeah, they are told they have to.
Mhm.
So that's a challenge, right, to ponder. But then as also the disappearance of the starter home. Starter homes aren't a thing anymore. Builders don't build them. I've asked around a little bit, and the answer I've gotten is all the government regulations. There's so many fees that the contractor faces when he goes to build a house. If he builds a little thing for a little bit of money, most of it's eaten up by fees. There's no profit in it for him, so he doesn't do it. He builds bigger because there's more profit window left for him to actually feed his family with. So I get it, but at the same time, our families are hurt by it too. So
Homes on wheels now. I'm talking about, the mobile homes
Yeah.
and things like that.
guess you can buy a tiny house, but that's not going to encourage families.
Yeah, our
So.
first was it was a mobile home,
Mhm.
12 by 50, had 2 little kids in it.
Yep. Yeah. So a question I spent some time pondering in my notes here is how can we help the generations that come after us? What does it look like to leave an inheritance? And don't just think money on that, right? What's worth passing down, and how do you pass it down? Faith, absolutely. That's a good spot to start that conversation, right? And so St. Matthew has done a lot of work in that over the last several years, teaching our parents how to teach the faith to their kids. I can share this one with you, just the fun of sitting in a staff meeting last week and having Deaconess say our Sunday school material doesn't cut it anymore. Our 3rd, 4th, 5th graders are too sharp. They need something harder. They need more. It's just like this is good. Yeah. We are exploring possibilities of what we might be able to help them with moving forward. So yeah, the passing on of the faith. This is one the world doesn't have, and this is one I hear on a regular enough basis from people in terms of why they don't want to have kids. Although I hear this less and less as the idea in general is people just don't want kids anymore. But before it hit that, it was why would I want to bring a person into this world? Like there's nothing here. Connects back to Carl's point earlier And as Christians, we see the opposite, right? Even if this world is evil, which it is, right? I mean, 2 Timothy 3, it will go from bad to worse before Christ returns. But there's a resurrection coming. There's a paradise coming. We have something worth passing on. That even if my daughters live 20 years or 80 years and it's filled with great suffering in this world, they get to enjoy paradise forever. Like, it doesn't even compare. Paul says it that way. I don't remember what verse, but Paul talks about the grief, the sorrow of this present world is not worth comparing with what is to come. It doesn't compare. It doesn't come close. So yeah, the passing on of faith, good. What else do we have to pass on?
You don't know how to handle things that come our way. I just happened to be watching this afternoon before we came, is a little podcast about the 10 dumbest football players, athletes. Well, the reason I remember that, because they had one of them, Terrell Owens, he was a great
Yeah, I remember
athlete,
Owens.
$80 million he made
Mm-hmm.
his lifetime. He is totally broke.
I don't know that I can use the word most, but many professional athletes end up broke.
Yeah, a lot of them.
You could pass on knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Passing on knowledge. Jim was starting to kind of push a little bit towards wisdom, but financial literacy is kind of a connection thereof,
Yeah.
wisdom and knowledge. I remember a football coach 20 years ago, that was what he would give his draft class. They would bring in the kids they just drafted, and he would sit them in a financial literacy class as part of training camp. I don't know if it worked for those guys or not, but it was a good idea. Hand a guy fresh out of college a giant paycheck. What's he going to do with it? So wisdom, knowledge, these are good things, right? Wisdom teaches how to discern good from evil, right from wrong, how to navigate a world that is filled with sin and temptation in order to still point to Christ. I thought of skills. I really think that should be the purpose of the education system. I don't entirely feel like it is the purpose of our education system. But I teach that in one of the milestones to the families. Kid's a teenager by the point of the milestone. It might be 10th grade. I don't remember exactly which one it is. But the idea that go to college in order to receive an education that gives you the skill to help your neighbor. That's the goal. If that's what you want to do. You don't have to do that. That's part of the conversation of that milestone too. So. But that's where skill sets are for, right? You might have a skill set that allows you to have a particular career that lets you make the income, that supports a family, provides hospitality and generosity to the neighbors around you, or maybe you have a skill set that you've learned that helps you to care for your family, care for a home. Those kinds of things are important as well. Aspiration and hope. You have hope. That connects back to passing on faith, right? But a lot of our world does not have hope. They live day to day without hope. This is what despair is. How do we aspire to marriage? How do we aspire to serve? How do we aspire to be generous towards others? Those kinds of things. Finances, passing on money. I think Jim's comment that got towards financial literacy is helpful to teach our children these things, teach them how to run a budget. I've done that at career day in my old town when I was up in Minnesota. The guidance counselor let me in, so I did a little budgeting workshop for a half an hour. Kids loved it because I gave out candy bars, but hopefully they learned something in the process too. But I never did try that here. Had a big idea, it just never came together. The bigger picture I wanted to do was to go to a high school, maybe 9th and 10th graders, and have basically have a booth where they started and it has like the average starting salaries of all these different kinds of professions based on recent data. Have them pick out what profession they think they want to do. So now you've got your number. And then just invite all the different companies to come in. Like have a rep from the local cell phone company come in and have, I don't know, for us it would be Spectrum for internet and stuff like that. Just have all these different companies and providers show up. They think they're marketing, but we're also helping these kids learn to budget. And just see, let the kids go to all these different booths, let these companies sell to them, and then see what's left over at the end or what isn't left over. And anyway, one of these days maybe I'll get to try it.
Well,
But
and some things, you think your doctor makes a lot of money, or your dentist makes a lot of money. But you have to look at what, not only their student loans, which they,
mm-hmm.
They'll be lucky if they pay it off in 20 years, but the equipment that they have to buy, and the rent that they have for their buildings, and the staff that they have to support.
Malpractice insurance.
Oh,
Wow.
professional liability is horrible.
Mhm. Yep, insurance in general. It's all over. Yeah.
So there's more to look at than just the
Yeah, the
not
dollar
what
coming
they-
in.
Yeah.
The,
All three expenses going up.
there's a kind of interesting the concept of trying to educate on the financial management,
Mhm.
budgeting side. It's what I'm hearing now. This is from our grandson who's in high school. Is they're required to take a financial
Mhm.
management class now in high school, which I think that's good.
Okay.
They're beginning to try to reach kids as part of their curriculum.
Where does he go to high school?
He goes to West.
West,
on the
yeah.
Good.
Boys had to do, the twins had to do
Yeah.
that too.
So many kids, as you know, get out, like you said, that college level or whatever just in life, and have no concept of what it is
Mhm.
to budget, run,
They-
manage money.
Often, statistics a few years ago that I saw, the surveys done, they expect six-figure salaries right out of the door.
Mhm.
And then they're surprised when those aren't there.
Well,
So good for that high school to do that.
and then some kids think if they go to a really elite school that they'll make more money, and that's not necessarily true, but they will have a
Mhm.
lot more debt.
Yeah, it usually isn't true. So yeah, one of the parts of one of our milestones is just walking kids through how do you pick what school to go to, how do you save for it so that you're not in debt when you're out of it, because it's still possible. It's hard, but it's possible to go through college debt free without parental help. If your parents can help, all the better. But it is possible. So yeah, I mean, all this plays in, right? To various struggles that are just snowballing around us. We talked about, even with LWML last night, we were on the topic of just the change in marriage, right? And how people don't marry anymore. Or if they are marrying, they're marrying much later in life. Where the average age of first marriage for women 50 some years ago was 20, and for men it was 22, and now it's past 30 for the average age of first marriage, which also means fertility is already declining and declining rapidly. And just like you said, they're told they have to go to college. They're told this is normal, and then they get there and they panic. But there's also the dual income trap that has become a thing. I have found more and more, by the way, that when I try to reason with people on the internet, they don't have a rebuttal, they just laugh. That's the only thing they can do, is they just laugh. So I remember describing this one to somebody, like, the thought was, both spouses working means more money, means we can have more of the experiences and the things that we think will make our family happy. But what's happened in reality was, the companies looked at it and said, there's more income, that means we can charge more. Prices went up. And so the family didn't end up with more buying power for having two incomes. What ended up happening was a lot of single income households feel boxed out where they can't afford anything anymore. It's still possible, but it's harder where it used to be more normal. So it's just...
Childcare has gotten so expensive that it's,
Yeah. That's one of those
even worth it.
parts of it, right? After childcare and taxes and the things that come out, how much is really left,
Yeah.
and was it worth it?
And then you want them to have activities in there.
Mm-hmm.
They've got, what seems is it's gonna be expensive no matter what. You can't do anything just for the skill or whatever you're doing you have to pay for the conference fees, you gotta pay for the uniforms, you gotta pay for, to a point that it's unbelievable.
Clinics.
Mhm.
I can't imagine how much Christy Gregg had put into the boys' soccer. Oh.
They are industries, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot here, but to our youngest, the encouragement to learn how to manage money, to learn skills that they can use in service of others. To those who are already in that age bracket, to encourage them to keep trying and keep fighting, that it's worth it, marriage is worth it, children are worth it. Again, we have something worth passing on. Those are good things. We teach those in our milestones. We try to help with that. And then for yourselves, listening, right, as we have St. Matthew, and I hear this regularly of other churches as well, that there is a group of young men gravitating towards the church right now. Take the time to listen. What are their struggles? What are they dealing with? And we can see how we can try to help. But it's a tough spot. That took us to the end of class today, though. So we can't fix that problem overnight. But again, the call is to love your neighbor, and we serve each other as best as we can. So, all right. Next week we will pick up at verse 22. I'm prepped through the end of this chapter, so next week I'll try to prep through the end of 21. We'll see if we get through the end of 21 next week, or if we need another week to wrap stuff up. But all right, very good. Thanks for coming.
I like the idea of child care in a small town, back in the 50s, it's like, go out and play and be home when the streetlights come on.
Yeah.
That was your daycare.
And now parents are afraid to let kids do that.
Well, you
They'll
can't
lock them
blame
up.
them.
But on the other hand, instead of being out playing in the streets, this becomes their babysitter, and this is far more harmful than what happens on the street. The statistics of how often children are actually harmed by being outside playing, and abduction's terrible. I'm not saying it's not, but the stats on how often that happens, versus how often a child gets hooked to pornography or gets stumbled into something that's going to cause lifelong damage and repercussions, it's not even close. But parents think their kids are safe here, danger out there, when it's more the other way around. So we try to teach on that too. We have those conversations with our parents here to try and encourage them.